Hey guys, ready for today's training game? I'm playing against Tommy Peebles07, who's part of the Chess Bootcamp Club on chess.com, and he's started with e4. So Tommy's rated 14-19, and of course I'm going to play the French. I may branch out sometime soon, but the French is perfectly respectable and it's working for me. So there's a couple of ways to go against this one. There's a more aggressive line with bringing out your bishop and pinning the knight, or there's the more standard c5, a bit more solid. So my strategy here is going to be, because I've got the black pieces, the first thing I want to do is to develop and see if I can in some way get the initiative in the game, because I'm starting on a slight disadvantage with the black pieces. So I don't want to take risks, but if I can force white back, make him lose a move or two, gain tempo on white, that could be a good thing. Okay, so we have like an exchange variation now. This is the marshal with the knight out here. Now if at any point he captures here, I simply recapture with the bishop, and now I feel like I've got perhaps a kind of equality, but in fact he's now got two attackers on there, hasn't he? Okay. Now that's interesting. That is interesting. This is not a... So the bishop's clearly undefended. The queens are facing off. Now one option I have is queen e7 check, which could be interesting. So if I go queen e7, he's got multiple ways to block. But remember, I am looking at this square, but the queen can't capture. Let's see what happens there. So now I am defending the bishop from the queen, and it comes with check. But I don't feel like it's... I've got the advantage. I also have knight f6 hitting the queen, and the queen can't take the bishop, right? So, because it's defended. So that might be one way to gain some initiative and gain that tempo that I'm looking for. You recognise Tommy's flag, it's the Red Dragon of Wales. There might even be thoughts of bishop takes f2 check, kind of sacrifice ideas, we'll see. So if I take the queen, knight will take the queen, my bishop will be under attack. I'm actually a pawn down. We've eliminated all the D&E pawns, and I've also lost my C pawn, which isn't great. Now let's see, I've got, say, queen takes, knight takes, bishop b4 check. Knight can't really block because I can capture and double up his pawns, right? But he'll probably play c3. I don't have to initiate the exchange though. I could, for example, just develop. I could also play bishop b4 and pin the knight. That kind of forces the issue. So bishop b4, if queen takes, I can recapture with my knight, and then I've got two pieces out on the board for Tommy's one piece, which is a thought. I could also develop this knight, and then if queen takes queen, knight recaptures, and I've got three pieces out in the board. So let's go that route. I think that's preferable. Okay, and now look, 1, 2, 3 to his 1. And I do feel now like I have the initiative. I'm also eyeing up that square for my knight. I'm also ready to castle. So you can see we're only a few moves into the game, guys, and already this is a struggle for control of the game. It's very, very wide open. So one thing it's telling me strategically already is I want to keep my bishops on the board, right? With all these pawns evaporated from the board, I want to keep my bishops, my long-range, high-speed attacking pieces. Knights are great, but they have less influence in an open board than bishops do. Right, now there's no queens. These bishops have the run of the farm. Okay, so bishop's attacking this. It's defended by rook and king. I'm not concerned. My first thought is I want to come in with my knight and harass this pawn. Is it going to force him to move his bishop back? It could well do. So, in general, if you can play a move that's forcing, even if it's slightly forcing, right, that makes your opponent do something that he wouldn't normally choose to do. So now bishop back here, for example. If he puts his bishop here, I'm inclined to capture, because if I can get any of his bishops off the board, fantastic. I want to control the board with my bishops. If I can eliminate his, so much the better. So now he's got a problem, because I'm threatening to capture on c2, win my pawn back, which is one thing, and also attack his king and his rook. Now, he might simply choose to castle and give up the pawn, which is fine. I'll capture it anyway, attack his rook, and then again he's going to have to play a move he doesn't really want to play, which is rook b1. Okay, now you see he's had to move his bishop back. So now I've got ideas, maybe a5, a4, hit the bishop, right? So if I play a5, he's probably going to play a4 himself to prevent that move. But maybe that's kind of weakening his position. It's also taking this square and therefore this whole diagonal away from that bishop. What other options do we have? I can improve my knight, maybe threat of rook e8 check. I'd imagine he wants to castle pretty soon, right? Now the difference here is, let's just do a count of development. 3-3 out in the board, but black has castled, which is worth 2 points. So right now I'm up. I'm actually 2 points up in development. I might play this. I might play rook e8. But I'm thinking actually, bishop g4 looks quite good. Now I don't really want to swap my bishop off, but it does connect my rooks. Now it might make him think twice about castling, because if he castles he's going to put his king here. And if I'm threatening to capture that knight, the only piece that can recapture is the g-pawn. But then I need to weigh up, is the loss of one of my awesome bishops worth this, which is to double his pawns on the double and isolate his f pawns and give him an isolated h pawn. It's a tricky one. It's definitely a tricky one. It's going to make him think though. So what you have to get into thinking is, okay, if I play a5, for example, yeah, I'm threatening to play a4 and kick the bishop away and then win this pawn and harass the rook. Okay, fair enough. If I play that, you have to think, is my opponent going to figure that out? You have to assume that they will, and that they will calculate what will happen if I get to play a4. And then Tommy's going to go, if he gets to play a4, that's definitely good for him because my bishop will have to move, then he'll win my pawn, etc. Right? So Tommy is very likely to play a4 himself. Okay, he's played a3. He's played a3. So first thought is to bring my knight back here. I mean, obviously my knight's under attack. I could capture his knight there, right? Then if he takes mine, but then I've got a bishop under threat, right? So he's got a sequence of 2 captures, which we don't want. So my first thought is to bring my knight back to here. I could even bring my knight here. No, that's only defended once, but actually attacked twice, so that's no good. takes, 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 takes. So actually he can't capture my bishop, right? So if I take his knight, he takes my knight. I take his pawn and I'm threatening his rook, but then he'll play rook g1, and look, I've got a pawn looking at my bishop and a rook looking at my other bishop, and a rook lined up with my king. So I don't like that, so I'm just going to retreat here. Sometimes discretion is the better part of valour. Now he may castle, but I still have this option. And if he castles, note that my bishop here will be looking down at the king. You're always happy in the French if your opponent plays d4 takes c5, because you get to recapture with your dark squared bishop, your king's bishop, and it's kind of free development. Plus your opponent has captured towards the outside. But in this instance, all the pawns are gone. Now, why did my opponent play that move? I think I know why, and I think he's planning to castle long. And there's two things that I notice. One is that if he castles, the king will abandon the defense of f2, so I could grab that pawn, which would make me happy. Another thing I'm thinking is, it might be good to centralise my rook. So if I put my rook a to d8, it's looking all the way up the open file, and he can't castle that way. So I think that's a jolly decent move. I'm playing that. Good to centralise your rooks, 1 point. Good to put your rooks on open files, that's 2 points. 3, if you can prevent your opponent's idea, so much the better. So now he cannot legally castle queenside, because his king would have to pass through check, and his king isn't allowed to do that. So what's he going to do? Is he going to castle short? If he castles short, he's got to be concerned about this possibility, and leaving his king there with doubled pawns. So this pawn would be here, right? This pawn would be pinned. I don't know. See, I'm still not sure if I want to give up my light squared bishop. I don't think I do. I don't really think I do. But I do feel like I've got, even though I'm still a pawn down, I feel like I've got some initiative in this game. So ideas from here is rook f2 e8, centralise both my rooks, and somehow find a way to bring this knight into the attack. Maybe even knight g6. That bishop's undefended. Always a good idea when your opponent's thinking, okay. So what I was saying is always a good idea just to identify undefended pieces. Okay, that's an undefended pawn. That's undefended. That's actually undefended. So what about rook fe8 now? Is that just dumb? I think it's kind of dumb. I can't give up that bishop. The knight is actually defending that pawn, but I think in this instance, just dropping the bishop back is a no-brainer. It's moving it from an undefended square to a defended square, right? So this pawn's defending the bishop. The bishop's also defending the pawn still. This pawn's defending this knight. This pawn's actually undefended. Okay, so I can now goldfish my own pieces, right? Defended, defended, and obviously the king's defending his own bodyguard pawns. So I've got 3 undefended pieces. What about my opponent? Okay, that's undefended. That's actually undefended. These are defending each other. That's defending that. Undefended, undefended, defended, defended, undefended, there, and that's technically undefended as well. So I'm colouring his in blue, aren't I? And that bishop's defending that pawn. So he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 undefended pieces at this point. And then when you look at the board like that, you can say to yourself, okay, well, how many undefended pieces are there? Is there the opportunity for a fork? So you're looking for patterns in the undefended pieces. And simply attacking an undefended piece is just a very, very standard, basic, ordinary forcing move, because your opponent's going to have to, at least to consider what they're going to do about it. So here I see, for example, with these two, this rook and this pawn, they're in line with each other. But, you know, let's say I was to, so with these two here, let's say I was to put a bishop on here. Is that interesting? No, because of that move, c3, right? Okay, now, reading the board, I notice my opponent's king is still in the middle. I notice my opponent still has a bunch of undefended pieces. This bishop has just been undefended, by the way. Right? I've got an attack against this. Defended, undefended, blah, blah, blah. Right? Defended, defended, defended. Okay? What do we see? Key things, king still in the middle of the board. That's really important. So, for example, I might have this idea, right? Attack the undefended bishop, force it to move. But how good is that move? I mean, it can just drop back to a2 where it is defended by the rook. And what have I achieved? Nothing. I've made my knight worse. I've actually reduced my knight's options, because it would only, from there, it would only be able to, it'd only be controlling 4 squares. Right now it's controlling 8. So that's not a good idea. Still the idea of this, which ain't bad. Still the idea of rook f e8. Then if my knight moves, this knight's actually pinned on the king. Okay, I'm going to do that. If you can hear snoring in the background, I've got a German Shepherd here. They're in a nice sleep. Okay, now, bishop f5 attacks an undefended piece. So, what's he going to do? Let's say he defends it with his bishop, right? But then I get to move my knight. I'm going to do this. I'm going to attack this undefended knight. Now, the knight can move. Right now, the knight can move. But if the knight moves, I then get to move this knight for free because it comes with discovered check on the king. So let's say the knight moves back there, right? Do I have a good move? Well, yes. I can move my knight here or here, attacking this bishop with check. That means my opponent's going to, you know, that's an option, to block the check and move the bishop. But it doesn't work, because there it would be attacked by knight and rook. So that's all right. So he's got problems now. So I think moving the knight is simply not an option. He can't move the knight for that reason. Or can he? What, were we talking about moving the knight, or were we talking about defending the knight? I think we're talking about... Yeah, we're talking about moving the knight. Okay, so... Right, he's found a really good move here. So he's actually attacking now the piece that would be checking. So, good move. So the point here is not to lash out. So I've got, for example, rook takes knight, okay? Obviously, bishop takes rook. But then he's got a problem, because of this discovered check. And all of that is because his king hasn't castled. Okay, so now I have this. I'm attacking the bishop, but he can actually move it back there. But then, f6. No, I can't play f6 because of a discovered check on me. Okay, but look, I've got knight and rook looking at that square. So if bishop blocks, knight takes, rook takes, he's lost a piece. He's lost a piece. And that's just calculation, you know. I didn't figure all of that before I made that move. I saw this move, yeah. I saw that if I take the knight, he recaptures. So right now he's up an exchange, which means that he's got himself a rook. He's captured a rook in return for a minor piece, which was the knight. Okay, so he's up the exchange here, but now he's in check, and he's got issues, right? So what can he do? He can move the king. If he moves the king, I grab the bishop. Okay, and we've actually equalised, because going up an exchange is worth 2 points, roughly, because a rook's worth 5 and a minor piece is worth 3. Minor pieces being knights and bishops. So if he moves the king, I get his bishop, right? Now I think these bishops are worth like 4 points, and I think knights are worth 2 on a board like this. Okay, so now I'm going to capture the bishop. So I've got a little victory there, minor victory. I've won myself a bishop. Now if knight takes, I get to recapture again with check, but key thing is I now have the bishop pair. So I'm a happy bunny right now. Right, surely that's a blunder. I see his mind. He's thinking bishop takes f7, check and a fork on them, but the problem is that I have like knight f3, double check. Now, when you're in check by a knight, you can't block a knight check. But I think that if you ever have a double check, the king always has to move. I think that's true. Now in this instance, if it was just the knight, oh, he can recapture, but he can't, because he's in check by the rook as well. So I think he's toast now. Yeah, so that would be the move. That would be ideal, but he's in check twice, and that's a problem. Yeah, he said good move in the chat. Double check. And double check is horrible, because now on the next move, whatever happens, I can win the knight, right? He can't block with the knight, because he's in check by my knight as well. That's the problem. So now he's gone from being slightly up. Now he does have 2 rooks. We have to bear that in mind. Okay, that was a little rash. He's just thrown the pawn in front of his king. To me, that looks like one of those moves that you make because you're angry at yourself. So I've just been punked by my opponent. I'm going to throw a piece out on the board. The problem is there's a lot of tactical risks here. Okay, now I've got 7 minutes 45 on the clock, so let me talk you through some ideas, right? Bishop there looks like checkmate, for one thing. And this is, guys, look at this, right? This is the power of the bishop pair in the ending. So my dark squared bishop's controlling all of them. Now, if I put my light squared bishop onto this diagonal, right, it's the interlocking diagonal. And this creates an impenetrable barrier that a king can't get through. Just in the same way that a rook creates an impenetrable barrier, or a queen, right? 2 bishops together can do the same, so you can quarantine the king. Now, but the problem is that my rook is also controlling the entire e-file. Okay, so I think that, for one thing, that's mate in 1. Another risk is knight e4, from where it can go to g3 with a fork on king and rook, or it can go here with a fork on king and undefended bishop. Remember this little move here, c2 to c3. I think he was kicking a piece away, and I said, oh, it undefends his bishop, and his bishop has sat there undefended all along. But I'm thinking that's the best move here, because it's winning. And there we go. And that was a really good game. Very, very good game. I think very, very instructive. Yeah, mate in 1. Great game, Tommy. Definitely interesting. So let's go through. I'm going to go to the beginning. Okay. Ooh. Wants to play a rematch. Go on, let's do a rematch. Let's do a rematch. I'm feeling in an aggressive mood. It's unrated. Let's go. Balls out. And we have the Vienna invitation. Oh yeah. Now, there's an interesting option here. Now this is one idea. That is, I think, the computer move. There is something called the Steinitz Gambit that I've just been looking at, but that's not it. No, that's not it. But this is a kind of Vienna Gambit. This is another variation of the Gambit. Or is it? If takes d4. Okay, d4. Now, 'tis the Steinitz Gambit. I've remembered it. Okay, now, this is inviting Queen h4 check. And then you play King e2. Now, if you want to know more about this, and if you want to go into it in more depth, then if you're not already following the chess giant on YouTube, Solomon Odell, I think his name is, really good channel, quite theoretical, his approach, so quite detailed, but he's got a video on the Steinitz Gambit. Okay, so now the idea here is to be able to play knight to f3 and get a tempo on the queen. So what we do have here is we have a decent center. Okay. Other ideas are knight, obviously attacking c7. That is a theme in the Vienna, always. Okay, and this is normal. This is the correct move. Okay. Now I'm going to play this, and if bishop takes knight, which is very tempting. Okay, you don't recapture with the pawn. You recapture with the king. Ho ho ho. I've got two pieces looking at this, so I want to recapture that. I want to come after this. This was invented obviously by Mr. Steinitz, who was a former world champion and influential player. I was looking forward to being able to pull out this one. So thanks to Tommy. And this is cut yourself sharp stuff. Now, interesting. So he's realised that actually the knight is pinned. The knight is pinned, so I can't capture the queen. So he's gone ahead and castled. Fascinating. So I don't actually know what to do in this situation. That doesn't work. Pawn takes, lose a rook. That's no good. I'm inclined to play bishop takes f4 and actually go up a pawn, weirdly. That pawn is defended by queen and knight, but the knight's pinned, so that won't work. So I think this looks about right. Then I can play bishop g3 and really cause that queen some problems. We've also got two attackers on c7 now. So this guys is really not for the faint-hearted. Now that pawn's gone, actually, also g3 is an option because he doesn't have pawn takes. So g3 hits the queen as well. Queen can't go there because the bishop would be attacking that. So there, can't go there, can't. Well, in fact, yeah, queen can't stay where she is either. Can't go there either. Queen would have to go to there, you see? Okay. And now king takes. And I'm up a pawn. Who'd have thunk it? And one of the things about Steinitz as a player that he brought to the game of chess is the idea of the king being an attacking piece, which is kind of funky. And the Steinitz Gambit is just textbook example of a very kind of forward-thinking attacking king. Right, you know, the queen can't go here because of my king. And you've got to quite like white here. I've got the bishop pair again. This is a nice looking bishop. It's looking down here towards the king's defender. This bishop has a huge diagonal. Could also just come here. This queen is now looking kind of overextended, maybe? Okay. So, one idea is like knight takes knight. That would be followed by queen takes, and I don't have bishop there because the bishop would be undefended and it would put me in check. So that's a no-go. Check there doesn't work. Check here doesn't really work. Bishop takes c7, attacking the rook. No. Thinking my best bet right now is an attack against the queen. So either g3 or bishop g3. I don't want to give him... See, knight takes d5. That's not a huge threat because it doesn't come with check. It doesn't attack my queen. So I'm thinking this move. And that also opens up a line for bishop to come to h3, possibly with check, depending on where the queen goes. So let's calculate. Right? If I play g3, where's the queen going to go? Well, very likely here. But then I have g4, hit the queen again. I think that's correct. I think that's the way to go. Oh, in fact, queen can come here, but defended by the knight. So then I would have to move to g2, like the fianchetto square for the king. That's not a bad thing. Then we might have an exchange of queens, and that's not a bad thing. But then we're probably going to get this. Takes, takes, rook takes. And then I've got this. So this is probably the move. Probably the move. That isn't so... Ooh, in fact, no. Then I don't have g4 because of this knight's out. So maybe I should have eliminated that knight. But if I'd eliminated the knight, the queen would have recaptured and pinned my bishop. And yeah, that's the move. So I'm going to come here. Now, question for Tommy. Now, knight can't take knight. There we go. All right. There we go. And again, we're not going to react. Rook takes queen is the obvious move. Don't think there's any kind of in-between moves. I mean, that's just pointless. You can capture with a knight or the bishop. That's just pointless. He's got two pawns that can capture. So I'm not going to think too hard. I think rook takes. And we're still up a pawn, but not likely for very long. Now, my king is actually not too badly placed on g2. I have a centralized rook. I have the center. Rook's defending that. So I'm thinking this is quite likely. Knight takes knight, pawn takes, rook takes, he wins his pawn back. And then probably c3. But I'm liking my bishops now. Look at these bishops. Again, boom, boom. We saw that last time round. If you have the bishop pair and you put them adjacent to each other. Now, if rook takes back, he's going to have two attackers on this pawn. So I think c3 is necessary. But again, let's just think it through. 13 minutes on the clock, ain't no rush. So Vienna players, you may be interested in this Steinitz Gambit. Can you believe we're on move 13? Alright, I want to defend that pawn. I don't want to play that, because knight will 100% take my bishop, and I can't recapture because rook takes rook. So that would be a dumbass move. Okay, so c3. c3. Also note, again, Tommy is left with one bishop, and we have an open board. Okay, so strike one to white. I still have the bishop pair. Now, if I now put my pawns on dark squares, His Grace, the dark squared bishop, the bishop of the dark squares, can't go there, or there. So I'm really cutting down the options for that bish. Now, what I really want to do is get my light squared bishop to here, or even to here, where it attacks the rook. And again, same thing that we saw in the last game. The king's defensive knight, if I can capture that with a bishop, we get doubled and isolated pawns on C and an isolated pawn on A. That's going to be good for me. But it wouldn't, it would mean giving up the bish. I definitely, whatever happens, my first instinct is to get my bishop off here. Another idea is bishop c4, hit the rook and attack f7, but he does have that and that both defending f7. This is a sharp-ass position. Guys, I mean, I have to say, I do this chess channel for beginners, for improving players. And there's a part of me that thinks, I should be just mixing up all the openings and constantly learning new openings and whatever. But you know what? I can't give up this Vienna because, I mean, I've just discovered this Steinitz Gambit, and it's like, wow, that's a load of fun. So, again, we're not freaking out, right? Don't freak out. That should be in the checklist. Don't freak out. Don't react. Okay? Whatever happens, consider all your possibilities and pick out the one that's going to leave you in the best shape. Now, here's what I'm thinking. Clearly, I don't want to capture the bishop and give up my bishop pair, because I know my bishop pair, as the game progresses, is going to be very useful, potentially. So, because if I take that, he's got rook takes. Now, if I play my bishop to c4, means a hitter, he's a rook, yeah? And the rook's going to have to move. The rook's undefended. The rook's going to have to move. Right? If he takes my bishop, I just take his rook, and I'm up the exchange. Happy days. All right? Now, where's his rook going to move to? Remember, my bishop here is looking at the c2 pawn. No, it's not. It's the f7 pawn. Thinking I was black for a minute. f7. Okay, so I'm going to play this, right? So the rook, see this? So we've got side-by-side bishop and pawn, and that's the same as side-by-side pawns, okay? Controlling all of those. And now, if I trade bishops, the rook can't capture because he's moved. So now if I trade bishops, the only way to recapture is with the c-pawn, and that's going to give him an isolated pawn in the middle of the board. And would you believe it? I actually have a superior pawn structure, even after all this crazy nonsense down there. Okay, so he's going to have to recapture with that. Now he's got an isolated pawn. And isolated pawns are hard to defend because they can't be defended by pawns. They have to be defended by pieces. And that gives your pieces stuff to do. So now I'm thinking, like rook hf1 puts another attacker against there and attacks the rook. So if this rook moves sideways, remember it can't go to any of these squares. It can only go here, 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 right? If it goes sideways, free pawn. If it exchanges, I've still got a rook on here. Still looking at this pawn. And what's more, we are approaching an ending. Do I want to capture with a rook? Yeah. We're now approaching an ending where I have a high-speed, long-range piece, and Tommy has a cumbersome warhorse. Right? Okay, I mean, this was pretty much forced. So my bishop, it's not as powerful short range as a knight, but it can control as many squares. So look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Ooh, look at that. Bishop controls 11 squares on the board. The downside is they're all of the same colour. They're all light squares. So, I think the obvious move now is this. For the simple reason that there's one fully open file on the board and I want it. So he now can't play his rook there because he's only got one rook. And if he plays his rook there, I take it and I win. Alright, so that's the first thing. Next, I want to be thinking, okay, the major imbalance now is I have a bishop, he has a knight. The other imbalance is there's a 3 on 2 pawn majority on the king side, and I have a 4 on 3 pawn majority on the queen side. Now, so that means that Tommy's job is actually probably going to be to try and throw these guys up the board. But what he's just done is he's just moved one of these. Now, these pawns, unlikely to have a good chance against a gang of 4, but they are defended, maybe backed up by a knight and a king, and a king's extremely powerful. My king is on the king side, looking after these two. So I'm just thinking right now, I think his idea is probably to play that. So maybe a4. Maybe a4. Or maybe bishop to here with check first. But then I've got a problem. Because then if I leave the bishop there, he plays rook e8, and my bishop's actually pinned against my own rook. But I think a4 looks like the move. At this point in time, I'm thinking if I was to trade off my bishop for this knight, we have a pretty equal position, right? The only real difference then is, because we do have a pawn imbalance, the other imbalance is he's got an isolated pawn, which is harder to defend, and the fewer pieces you've got, the harder it becomes. This pawn is also undefended, so let's goldfish quickly. Aha! Okay, you broke my goldfish. So now that's undefended. That pawn's defending them, that's undefended. Rook's defending that, pawn's defending that. Okay, so there's 3 undefended pawns. This, guys, is not hard to do. B4 looks alright. He does have the option of rook here. But then, I think I would exchange rooks. And the reason is, because if you look at the board, right, we've all got, let's just look at the side, the edgemost 2 files, yeah? We've all got pawns on the edge. And when you've got pawns on the edge, you can have pawns, and we've got a pawn imbalance on each side of the board, right? So it's going to be someone's job at some point to prevent pawns on the edge from dashing up the board. Stands to reason. And I have a bishop and he's got a knight. And bishops can do that poof, in one go, right? Take his knight, 2 moves to get to that square, and he's closer. Bishops are high-speed, long-range pieces. Is that a stupid move? Yeah, it's quite stupid. Okay, so what I'm going to play now, I'm just going to move my king across here. Just defend my rook. But, so his king's now protecting that square, okay? Now, so let's do this. I'm not going to mess about. I have now, so the rooks are off the board, and what that means is that Tommy is now lacking any high-speed piece. Kings are blooming turtles, right? They can move 1 square at a time. Kings are plodders. They are powerful. Now, the kings are the most powerful pieces on the board, right? Very powerful pieces, but they're slow as heck. Now, I have a high-speed long-range piece. Tom has a knight, right? A heavy horse. A heavy-ass horse. Now, so I'm thinking that b4. I'm thinking bishop here, maybe looking at this. Okay. So I want to keep my bishop on the board. For sure. I'm going to push that, just prevent this idea. Okay. Now, my king actually does have a route up into the board, and that's important. His king can't go there or there. I'm not worried about his knight. His knight's currently on a light square. This is a move, but I think it's kind of slow. I think I want to improve my king. You want to centralize your king at this point in a game. Now, okay, so what does he want to do? I think I want to put my bishop here sometime soon. He's going to have to be pushing h5 at some point. I'm just going to play that. He pushes h5, takes, I recapture, and I've then got 2 pieces controlling this. Plus, with this, I now have a threat of a discovered check. And he's not going to like that. Look at this there. King d5, and I win a pawn. Because Tom's got to move the king. Right? If I go here, he's in check. This isn't even an idea, because bishop takes with check again. And I've won 2 pawns. With 2 really, really interesting games. Really instructive games. Now, if I was him, I'd be moving this king. He can't have this, because that simply loses his central pawn, and then look, he's got a 2 against 4 on the queen side of the board, and that's, you know, it's time to go and knock on the fat lady's dressing room in that case. No, mistake. Big mistake. Okay? Now, I'm not going to capture here, right, for sure, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to let him capture and pawn takes. Why? Because my pawn will then control these 2 squares. And that means the king can't progress. Can't get round, can't get through. Right? You've got pawns like this, neither king can get through. So I'm going to grab this. Just a quick sanity check. Yeah, looks fine. If pawn takes, and I'm happy, because his king can't. If his king wants to get round, it's going to be 1, 2, 3. Oh, can't go there. Nope, his king can't get through. Can't go there. Can't go there. Yeah, can't go there or there. Can't go anywhere near my king. Right? You have to get into colouring in, and colouring in chess is transformative. Transform the game. I really, really like my position all of a sudden. And look at this guy. This guy's controlling these 2 squares. And that is the power of the holy man. This knight is sitting there, sitting on its hands right now. I mean, it's sitting there protected by a pawn that, by the way, is undefended. It's not in a happy place. That is not a happy horse. Can't go there. Okay. Now, surely we're looking at giving up more pawns, right? Hang on. So king here. Is he going to push that? Takes knight. Nah. King here. And my simple job is to get Dave, the D pawn, to D8. And this king is looking super vulnerable, right? If I get a queen here, it's checkmate. No, it's not. He does have... No, he doesn't. Because look, long range bishop. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah? Welcome. Join me in Tommy's world of pain. This is horrible now. I would say white is like... in like a +7 situation now or something. Here... Look, kings can trap knights. Did you know this? Kings can. If you get a knight in the corner like that, and a king here, knight can't get out. This is now 100% resignable. This pawn can't do anything. This pawn can't progress because it gets taken. This pawn can't progress because it gets taken by the bishop. This pawn can dance up to here. Yeah, this is now a completely lost situation, but a very, very instructive game. Plus, it's my first game in the Steinitz Gambit. So I am very pleased with the way it's gone, actually. Yeah, so let's see, pawn takes, the king can't progress, this pawn can't push forwards, because bishop takes. Now this pawn's blocking this pawn. See? Bishop takes. King can't go there, can't go there. Can't go there. He's actually only got one move on the entire board. And, hang on. I've learned from this. Don't pre-move your promotion. First check that you're not stalemating your opponent. Now, I'm pretty sure I'm not, because he's always got that and he's always got that. Is he just going to resign, or is he going to let me checkmate him? Nothing wrong with resigning, but okay. Now, if I get a queen here, he has that square, so I'm okay. And let's grab the pawn with check. And now, let's throw in another check and get the queen one more rank up the board. And another. And now the king has to retreat to the back rank. And that's checkmate. Okay, all over. Super, super game. That was really interesting. That was really interesting. Tommy, you're a legend. Two very, very good games. Yeah. Yeah, great game. Okay, and that is going to be one super instructive lesson for you guys. Hope you've got a load of tips and ideas out of that. I certainly have, and I am very, very pleased that I found myself another exciting and dramatic line in the Vienna game. Like I say, go and subscribe to Chess Giant on YouTube if you want a bit more kind of theory about this kind of stuff. So I would say that Solomon on Chess Giant he doesn't go as deep as some channels like Hanging Pawns, which can be, I would say, it's probably completely overwhelming for a beginner. But yeah, if you're in the intermediate range, if you're above maybe 1200, you might want to check out Chess Giant. He does have some good stuff on there. But other than that, thanks for watching. Appreciate your support. I'll see you soon.